Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Welcome back. I know I've taken a few weeks off and I kind of just disappeared for a little bit, but that's because some big stuff was happening here and I was starting to map out season 2 of this podcast. So I am so excited to be starting off with this new episode in season 2 of the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. Over the coming weeks, we have some amazing guest speakers coming on, and I am really super excited for everything that's about to unravel in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. It's so beautiful to see how I had this vision, and it is slowly spiraling and growing into my dream, into me wanting to spread this information and to educate women on how they can align to their womb and all the benefits that come with aligning to the womb. So this week in episode 1 of season 2, we are going to be talking about a topic that I am really excited to begin to explore. We were going to talk all about puberty and how we can support our teens and why we should want to support our teens. You know, I have an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, and although they're not yet menstruating, they're on the cusp. Puberty could happen at any point. And this has been something I've been thinking about for a few years now. As a menstrual cycle educator, as a mom to 2 girls, I'm constantly thinking about how can I be that mirror for them? How can I start to show them that I can live with a rhythm of my hormones and that I can authentically be me and that I can shift into being 4 different versions of myself throughout my cycle, and all of them are important. All of them are powerful. And I think this is such an important message for our youth to witness, and then for us to be able to coach them on as mothers, as aunties, as educators, maybe as grandparents. Because I think this is such a great tool to help empower our girls, to empower our daughters, to show them that there's so much wisdom in what their body is trying to guide them through. And if we can really learn it and tap into it, I really do believe that we can relieve some of these big issues that happen during puberty. I don't know about everyone else. I know about myself, and I hated those years of junior high and maybe the first year of high school. Those were not fun years. Those were a lot of shifts and emotions and changes. And to be honest, I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I don't remember my mom ever talking to me about it. I just remember it being something that we would kind of fell into, that, your friend had her first period and she kind of told you about it, and then you got excited and you waited for years to come, but you really didn't know what it meant. And the school kind of touched on stuff, but it was more of sex education and not really about your body and what was changing and what that really meant, at least not in a way that was nourishing and that made you excited about it. And I really want to create this space where I'm getting girls excited about their changes, about their transformation, about moving into womanhood. And so, the more that I reflect upon this, there's so many components to it, but there's some key focuses that I want us to focus on today. So one of them being is that, and I thought this was a really interesting statistic, and it comes from Luann Brezendine. She's an MD doctor, and she shared in her book, The Female Brain, about how, because women are now having children later in life, This means that a lot of the daughters that are being born into the world are going to be going through puberty at the same time their mothers are going to be going into the transition to menopause. And so, like I shared, I have an 8 and 9-year old, and I'm almost 43 years old. So I'm in that perimenopause phase right now, or just starting to dip my toes into it. I haven't really noticed big changes. But it's a really important thing to start to reflect upon and think about, because if our daughters are starting to go into puberty and their body for the first time is starting to feel and experience new surges of hormones that they've never been introduced to. Like, these are the first times that they're going to be experiencing progesterone and estrogen in the system and experience them on a rhythmic cycle, that their body's learning a new way to exist. And in reverse, what's happening to us moms that are now going into perimenopause or on that cusp of menopause is our body's winding down. So theirs is winding up and ours is winding down. So their same surges that they're experiencing, we're kind of experiencing in reverse. So we hear of, like, when you're going through menopause, there's the hot flashes, there's, the emotional element, there's the mental element, there's all these different things that are happening physically in your body. But the same thing is happening to our teens. And we're not educating our teens on this. And we're not educating women on how to thrive during menopause. And so I think this is a beautiful time where, we can come together with our teens and we can both learn a new rhythm. We can both experiencing these shifts together in a way that's really nourishing and holistic. So I really think that this is an opportunity for us as women to really hold space for our own transformation, as well as being able to have really deep connective discussions and experiences and create memories with our daughters that really help us all to feel empowered by our body. So that's the first thing I wanted to share, just is that, as we start to think about puberty, rather than going, oh my God, my daughter's going through puberty and this is the worst, can we start to reframe that of going, my daughter's going through a transition and I'm going through a transition. And how can we start to create a beautiful new relationship, a new way of coexisting together and mirroring that experience for one another? Now, another reason why I think it is so fundamental that we are exploring this with our daughters, and I always share this when people ask me about it, is that our daughters are being introduced to being cyclical women. And like most of us, maybe listening to this podcast for the first time, are just being introduced to this idea that we have 4 different phases, that we feel different in 4 different phases. Like, I'm sure as you start to learn about your own cycle and learn about it as like these inner seasons, there was these aha moments of going, that's why I feel this way. And that's how I could thrive better, or that's what I could do differently, or that's how I can support my body and the changes. And so if we give that same gift to our teens, think how much ease is going to be brought into the system for them. They will begin to understand why they feel outgoing and, social, and why maybe they're not so triggered by stress in the first half of their cycle. And then why in the second half of their cycle, they might go through big triggers of feeling socially rejected, of feeling really sensitive to stressful situations, why there might be these episodes of feeling like they're going through intense depression, and knowing that it might be linked to hormones, right? And so the more that we can set them up with understanding their 4 seasons and how that might feel in their body, the more that we're giving them a guide to understand how they can thrive in their cycle as well. And when we look at them being in junior high and high school, there's a lot of social pressure during these years, right? Not only with peer pressure from friends and, thinking about dating and starting to be attracted to opposite sex, but also that there's so much pressure with grades with meeting parents' expectations, with, the pressures that they put on themselves as what will allow them to be seen as successful or as, accomplished. And so this is where, when we teach them about their cycle, we can really give them a guide to knowing that there are going to be times in their cycle that they might feel like they're struggling, or they might feel like their self-worth is a little bit lower, or they might start to question friendships of going, does this person like me? Or starting to doubt themselves as a human, and knowing that that could be a hormone fluctuation that's happening. One thing that I read in the book, The Female Brain, that, it just was like, it was my mind-blowing moment when I think it was probably the key thing that I read in that book that made me go, wait a minute, I need to change the way I see myself in my period so that I can really help my daughters, and to really support them. Was she talks about how if we were to take our SATs or our oral exams in our ovulation phase, we would do so much better because we have huge communication skills. We have critical thinking. Like, our brain is being really juiced up with vocabulary here because of estrogen. And so when we have this surge in our body that, makes us be, more authoritative, more the ability to like really go and take risks and to present, we can excel. But can you imagine someone who's on their period, day one, all hormones are crashing, and they are supposed to do some kind of presentation in front of their class, and the words aren't coming, and they feel like they're stumbling over their sentences, and even though they might be reading off a card, there's just not, they're not using any tone, and they just feel like they're failing. Like, it's almost like in the first sentence, they feel like a failure. And if a child or a teen isn't aware of their hormones and what's happening, that could play a lot on their self-worth. That can make them question of like, am I worthy? Like, am I stupid? Or, oh my God, I'm going to fail this, and really starting to be hard on themselves. And I think this is where us as a parent, if we have a student who's always getting A's or 75, 80%, and all of a sudden they bomb a test, they get like 65, especially in high school when you have like your big finals that are due with so much, like a huge percentage of your grade. I think this is a beautiful time when they come home and you can just see the disappointment in them. You can see how they're feeling like they just failed. How you could have that talk with them of going, but wait a minute, where were you in your cycle when you took this? Like, were you on day 1 or were you on day 27? Right? And if they're like, yeah, I was on my period, then that's for us to be able to coach them going, but love, your brain, it's not working right now. Like, you have no hormones supporting it. Like, it's okay. It's okay. This was not about you as a person. This has everything to do with about your hormones, and that you were really pushing your body and your brain to do something that it could not do at this time. Right? And as an educator, how beautiful would it be when we have this student because we get to know our students. And so, you start to see their patterns. And all of a sudden, someone who does exceptionally well all the time does very poorly. We could probably go, without asking them, we could probably go, I wonder, like, she's a teen girl, I wonder if maybe she was on her period. I wonder if she's, maybe having, like, it's before the days of her bleed or whatever the case might be. And going, you know what, I'm going to test her in another week. I'll give her another chance. I'll retest her in a week to see if it changes the grade. And if it changes the grade, then it means it had nothing to do with how much she knew or how smart she was. It had everything to do that her brain went to sleep. Her brain just could not cope with that. And so I think there's something really beautiful about us being able to support our youth. Because if we can support our youth, there's a good chance that depression rates might lower, right? That all of a sudden these self-doubts and these self-worths. Even thinking about the fact that if we could support them with understanding that, they are going to probably do not as great during these times, and allowing that to keep them encouraged and to keep them empowered so that they can be like, hey, you know what? I still want to go to university. I'm not a failure. I still want to strive to be this profession. I still want to do this, rather than them going, I'm never going to get it. I'm just going to stop. And little personal touch here. This happened to me in grade 12. I don't know about you, but as a woman and as an entrepreneur and as a mom to 3 little kids, I'm always trying to figure out how I'm going to leave my mark on the world, how I'm going to be able to be resourceful and bring in the income I truly desire, how I can start to maybe break some of those old money beliefs that have been holding me back. Which is why I am so excited that my coach, Kate Northrup, has just released a money breakthrough guide for female entrepreneurs. Realistically, this is for any woman out there. Kate has taken 17 women, all earning between 6 to 8 figures, and asked them what their biggest money breakthroughs were. Instead of keeping all these money moves saved up in her DMs, Kate is sharing them with the world. And now I am sharing them with you. Go get your free copy. The link is in the show notes below. Grade 12, I was good at math. I felt confident in math, and I felt like I was pretty good. I was taking physics and so forth. But I think it was grade 11, actually. I had to take a final exam, and somehow I got 48% on it. 48%. That destroyed my self-worth. It really made me go, I never want to do math again. I don't want to, I was taking all the sciences, and all of a sudden I dropped out of all of them. When I went to university, I played it safe. I went into things that I knew I could excel at. I didn't push myself anymore. And in fact, I retook math. I think it was grade 11 math. I retook it so that I could get a better grade so I could apply to university. But that played a lot on my self-esteem, and it's still something that I remember, right? So that's how it can really play into us. And so this is where, if we can really nurture and give good education to our teens about what's happening in their body, maybe we can change the future for them. Maybe we can make them feel a little bit more confident. So I think personally, this will help with self-esteem. It helps with them to getting to know themselves so that they're taking risks still, that they're challenging themselves, that they get to know themselves well enough that they can set some healthy boundaries for themselves, for their social circles. And ultimately, it also creates a really nourishing landing pad for them to know that they can come to you and talk to you these things about you. You're opening up the channels of communication, which I think is super important. Now, another thing that has crossed my mind recently, and I haven't read this anywhere. This is not something that's been researched, at least not that I know of. But I wonder as well, and I say this very gently, I guess, because I was a byproduct of a teen pregnancy. I sometimes wonder too that if we taught our youth about menstruation, about periods, about the cycle, about the 4 phases, if this, like I said already said, it kind of eliminates some of that, maybe possibly the depression, but would that reduce potentially suicide rates as well? Would that potentially reduce teen pregnancies? Not because of sex education, but because if we're feeling vulnerable to social connection, if we're feeling lack of self-worth and not understanding why we're feeling this, perhaps we might make choices we wouldn't make then. Not always saying that's always peer pressure, but maybe peer pressured into having sex, or maybe feeling like everyone else is doing it, I guess I should do it, and it not really being aligned with who we actually are, but we're just doing it because of that social acceptance part part of it. Which then once you cross that barrier, then if they don't have good boundaries and good understanding of their menstrual cycle, I would like to believe that the chances of teen pregnancy are going to go up. Because like my mom got pregnant at 15. And honestly, reflecting back on my teens, I don't remember a lot, but I don't really, and I'm pretty confident that I didn't learn in depth enough about my menstrual cycle, because when I went through my fertility journey, that was the first time that I realized that there was more to my cycle than just ovulation and period. And in fact, I didn't really understand how ovulation worked. Like I realized that there was an egg that was released and that a sperm had to meet it, and that has how it created a baby. But I didn't realize that I don't think I really understood timing sex for conception until I got deep into my fertility journey and really had to understand the actual days that were going to be my peak days and what that meant and how my cycle actually went and how implantation worked and so forth. So if me at 30 didn't really understand it, there's probably a gap in the education system there. Granted, like I said, it's been years since I was in school at that point, but I don't know. I don't know if it's improved or not. I have relatives and friends that are educators, and some of the stories that they tell me about health class, I kind of cringe at what is and isn't being taught. And so I don't know. I'm just putting this out there as like, if we understood our bodies better, could we support our youth better? Both girls and boys. Like, let's not just put this on girls. Like, girls get to understand their rhythm so that they can be really in tune with their body and understand why they're feeling what they're feeling, and understanding how they can navigate the lows just as much as they can navigate the highs. But then for also the men in our life, the boys in our life, to understand this as well, to be more supportive, to see that there is a different way to live and exist, and that, we are two different hormonal sets of beings and we operate differently. So I'm putting it out to you to think about the girls in your life, the daughters, the nieces, maybe your teacher, the girls in your class. And can we start to think in the lens and start to, when we see them and interact with them, can we start to see where they might be in their cycle without asking them? We don't need to know their personal information, but can we get a vibe of where they might be at? And then can we meet them there? And then can we also feel confident enough in our own bodies that we can also start to be that mirror, be that representation of what it looks like to be a cyclical woman in her power and knowing her cycle? Because even if we don't know how to have these conversations, if we can live it and embody it, they will pick it up and they will question it, and then they will start to integrate it into their life. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Let's start to really explore cyclical wellness for the next generation, so that we can start to release some of the shame and some of the guilt, and so that we can really start to change the environment for puberty and for our teens. So I'm going to put it out there that for the first time ever, I have created a parenting course of how to raise empowered girls. It's going to be offered for the very first time starting October 15th. I think this was an idea that's always been marinated in me because I have two young girls, and, I'm starting to create my plan of how I want to educate them and how I want to support them and how I want to be a resource for them. But I recently had a girlfriend who reached out to me and was saying, I'm divorced and I need him to understand how he could support, because I'm not going to be with her for a whole week. And if it happens when she's at his house, I need him to be able to be that supportive resource. Can you create something for dads? And so I was like, well, why don't I create a resource for both parents? And so I'm going to be hosting this course for the very first time, giving it a try of what I've been researching, what I'm going to be putting into play for my daughters, and some helpful tips and tools And then we're going to have a whole week just for dads. So that way it'll be simplified, it will be to the point, and it will just give them the right information on how they can really just be that anchor of support for their daughters in all 4 phases. So if you're interested in the Raising Empowered Girls course, I'm going to put the link down in the show notes. It's going to be conversations like this over a whole month. It's a 4-week course. We're going to go deep into really having the tools and the resources so that we can hold these conversations with our daughters and we can feel confident and we can really feel like we've come into alignment with what it is that we want to teach them, so that we don't feel like we just kind of walk in to puberty and go, holy shit, what now? How do I deal with this? I want everyone to feel really well resourced and know that they have a good set of tools. So the link is in the show notes below. And yeah, if you have any questions, go into our Facebook group, pop them into there. This is a conversation that I'm excited to dive into and to hopefully provide a new way of communicating to our teens. Are you excited about aligning to your cycle? If so, make sure that you subscribe to this podcast and like the episode if it really resonated with you. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.